We're back, and so is my dear friend and valued colleague, Rod Martin. You can follow his work at rodmartin.org, and I strongly encourage you to do so. Subscribe to his wonderful newsletter, I guess you might call it, or platform, the Rod Martin Report. Featured there at the moment, Rod, is a piece about nuclear power, and you make a comparison to John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil. Explain that to us and its strategic importance for the United States.
Well, we literally have a company now called Standard Nuclear, which is really cool. And there's a General Matter and all kinds of wonderful entrepreneurial ventures in the nuclear space, which you can thank Donald Trump for more than anybody else. Now, back of that, you can thank Peter Thiel and some guys like that who have actually put up the funding, and a lot of the personnel in these companies come from the broader Thiel Kairatsu and SpaceX and Tesla and so forth. But the aim is very simple. You can get more energy out of one pellet of uranium than you can out of tons of oil. So why wouldn't we be using that? Better question, why would we be trapped in the mindset of 1970s era nuclear accidents, which, by the way, didn't kill anybody? 3 Mile Island killed absolutely nobody, and I get more radiation flying at 30,000 feet in a commercial airliner than anybody got at 3 Mile Island. So the Trump administration sees this. They understand that energy dominance actually does depend on electrical generation, that there are no energy poor, wealthy countries. That's not a thing. And especially with AI data centers and other things on the horizon, I would point out, President's not talking about it quite as much, but the deployment of Iron Beam by Israel, a directed energy air defense, which we're also using at a relatively small scale on our carriers right now to great effect. The growth of directed energy weapons is going to require, imagine, a lot more energy. Well, the easiest way to do that is with a small modular reactor. Something you can actually transport at need, something that is built with more or less off-the-shelf parts in a factory setting instead of piecework by hand over decades of time. And the administration has made that possible. So we're having this nuclear renaissance right now. And the fuel issue, the reason for the analogy to Standard Oil, is that John D. Rockefeller didn't build the world's greatest historical fortune just by drilling for oil. Lots of people were drilling for oil. What he did was he standardized the refined product. In a world that ran on kerosene, he wanted to create a standard, as it were, for kerosene that you could count on, that wouldn't blow up in your kerosene lamp in your home, that wouldn't set your children on fire. And he did. And he captured 90% of the market and cut the price of that by 90%. For all the talk of antitrust, and of course, ultimately the government busted up Standard Oil, the truth is it did the exact opposite of exert monopoly power when it came to prices. So these guys are hoping to do that with a fuel called TRISO. TRISO fuel is actually completely self-contained. The pellets are in a ceramic coating that actually prevents the release of the radiation. The fuel is self-contained with regard to radiation. You just can't actually leak it, and you can't melt it down. The Chinese actually tested this. They just turned off a nuclear reactor using TRISO fuel and turned off the cooling, let it cool down naturally. Normally that would be the China syndrome, only coming from the other direction. And nope, No problem. The TRISO fuel just naturally cooled down with no incident whatsoever. So that's a game changer. That means the whole world can have as abundant energy as they want. And since not everything's going to run on that, your car's certainly not going to run on that unless you bought a Tesla. What that's going to do is that's going to free up more and more oil and gas for export to the various parts of the world who need U.S. product. So there you go. The nuclear renaissance is another piece of Trump's moral realism and his general reordering of the world in an America-centric way.
Yeah, and with energy dominance being a critical component of that strategy, isn't it?
Essential.
And Rod, just quickly touch on, I mean, this is not just happening. The president last year, as you point out in your piece, issued 4 executive orders, some of them bearing on actually bringing some of these small nuclear reactor designs competitively, I guess, to fruition in time for our 250th anniversary on July 4th. Is that correct?
Which is happening. It's really quite remarkable. For the whole history of the Atomic Energy Commission, which was the former regulator, we were just approving nuclear plants right and left, over 100 of them in a relatively short number of years, about 20 years all in. That includes several years in which commercial nuclear power wasn't even viable yet, and they're moving that kind of numbers at that kind of speed. Then, in 74, we created the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to replace it. And in all the years since 1974, the NRC has actually approved 2 nuclear plants, of which 0 have come online. So it's just absurd how this has gone. And the Trump administration has reversed that. Regulation is no longer the huge problem. And we're making real progress on stupid policies like ALARA. The DOE has phased it out entirely. The NRC has a rulemaking that should take effect in November. Some of the dumber things we've done, scared by the left, are going away. And we can have this safe nuclear power renaissance that facilitates large-scale exports of oil and gas.
Yeah. Let me put in a special plug for one of those competitors. A friend of ours is involved with, David Pickering, which involves a technology that will enable nuclear power to be fueled by the spent fuel, which is a current blight in our country, housed in vulnerable ponds in nuclear facilities around the country or in casks. And this is just profoundly exciting that there's, I guess, hundreds of years worth of power that can be generated from that stuff, which is otherwise, as I say, an environmental danger to our country. So, Rod, at the bottom line of all of this is, do you see the American nuclear sector being restored to preeminence worldwide, not just for our own domestic consumption, but also for power sourcing elsewhere around the world?
Absolutely. And look, it's very, very difficult to turn any of this stuff into a weapon. You're talking about uranium that's enriched to 5% or less. There's no way you're turning that into a bomb. I would suggest that a thorium fuel cycle would be even better for non-proliferation. But the truth is, if you can build small modular reactors, which cost a tiny fraction of the older technology reactors that we have in the United States, and you start getting those online reasonably quickly, it's world-changing, not just for the United States, but for the countries who need power.
But for the world, in point of fact. Rod Martin, thank you. This is great stuff. Check it out at rodmartin.org, folks. Come back to us very soon if you would, Rod. We'll look forward to our next visit. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.